Well, welcome. We are inside the orphanage building in Gettysburg. This building itself was built in 1836. Is infamous for its dark history. During the Battle of Gettysburg, this was a field hospital for the Union Army. There were dead and wounded soldiers in these rooms. We know there were amputations conducted. Arms and legs were stacked right outside these windows. After the Civil War ends in 1865, 620,000 men lose their lives there in the course of the Civil War, 2% of our country's population at the time. So buildings such as this would become one of the first orphan homes to open after the Civil War. And this building opened in 1866 to great fanfare, and it would remain open to 1877. And when the orphanage initially opened, things were going really great. The children were really happy, they're well fed, they're well clothed, they're getting a good education, they play out in the yard, volunteer in the community. Within the first year of opening, the orphanage was visited by then General U.S. Grant, who would become president 2 years later, and he had a very historic picture taken right in front of the building with all the children. The first 3 years that this orphanage was open, things were going really great. But then some of the matrons who worked here, there was a lot of turnover. And in 1870, the leadership of the orphanage had to bring in a new head matron. Board member named Dr. John Francis Bourns recommended a woman named Rosa J. Carmichael. She said she had credentials unmatched by anyone else. She was a strong disciplinarian. And that's where everything changes in this orphanage. That's where the dark history begins. I always feel like there's a dark cloud always hovering over this building. The children who had been happy are now miserable. They are terrified of this woman because she would punish them and torture them in all types of cruel ways out in the yard, inside the building. Her cruelest punishment of the children would take place in the cellar. When the orphanage opened, initially there were about 30 or 35 children, but it would grow to 80 to 100. And this building became so overcrowded, they actually built an addition on the side of this building, and that became the girls' dormitories. So in total, there could be a couple hundred kids at the maximum. This room that I'm standing in, for many years, this was our gift shop. But earlier this year, several months ago, we began a restoration process in this room. And this is the original brick, 2 fireplaces. This was been covered up for many, many years. And obviously, what we uncovered, we actually found some artifacts in these shelves. And probably the most interesting piece we found was a left rib bone that several people have looked at it said it possibly could be that of a child. And we found some marbles and some buttons, and this picture here was actually the grand plan that they had for this orphanage. It looks like a cathedral, and obviously it never came into fruition. The board member named John Francis Bourns, he was the secretary and treasurer, and unfortunately he was known to be a con man, and he was embezzling funds from the orphanage, so that grand idea never came into fruition. So the connection to the Battle of Gettysburg and this orphanage would actually begin on July 1st, 1863, when Union Sergeant Amos Humiston of the 154th New York Infantry is mortally wounded on the north end of town. And as he lay dying, he held a photograph of his 3 children. This is a copy. Their names are Frank, Frederick, and Alice. That would be the last image he sees before he passes away. 3 days later, a local woman from town would come across his body. She would take the photograph and give it to her father, who owned a saloon on the outskirts of Gettysburg. His name was Shriver. Mr. Shriver would have a chance encounter with a doctor from Philadelphia named John Francis Bourns. He was a surgeon. He volunteered here in Gettysburg for the Union Army. And Dr. Bourns was intrigued by the photograph, and he asked if he could have it. And the doctor made it his mission to find the family of the fallen soldier because nobody knew who he was. Amos Humiston didn't have any identification on him. So the doctor would provide a detailed description of the children and publish the description in all the major Northeast newspapers. You couldn't publish photographs, but he described the children and their clothing. It became really big news in the nation, actually. And the headlines in newspapers read, "Children of the Battlefield, whose father was he?" And it took 3 months before this woman, who was Amos Humiston's wife, Felinda, she lived in a small town in New York State called Portville. She would send the doctor a telegram. In turn, the doctor would go to Portville and visit. He would meet the family. He was to return the original photograph, but he really didn't. But he was welcome as a hero, a good Samaritan for all the good he was doing. The doctor had small ambrotype images made of that photograph that he was selling for 25 cents a piece. He said the money would go to the future education of those 3 children. So everybody thought this doctor was this wonderful man when he really wasn't. But he would become the founder of this orphanage, the founding board member. He was the overseer. He would bring in the employees, the matrons to work here. But sadly, the doctor was not a good person. He was a con man and he was embezzling funds. The picture he returned to the family was not the original. He gave them a copy. The family was furious. And the doctor told them, "You'll get the original photo upon my death." And many years later, when he passed away, the family never did get that photograph. He probably sold it at a nice price to put in his pocket. He would secure donations from churches. They would donate $25 or more a year to sponsor a child. But the doctor was keeping most of that money, cutting back on the quality of the food. The money he promised the family for their education, they only saw a small portion of that money. He kept most of it for himself. This particular room here is not an original structure of the house, but this was the backyard of the orphanage. And we have a paranormal team that does midnight investigations, and they claim this room can be very active. Just on the tours that I give, there have been 3 different people over the last year who have told me they've seen a man inside the closet in that corner there. And best described, it's a man wearing gray. One night, a man said he was wearing a gray jacket and a red shirt. A child of about 12 or 13 told me that he was not wearing modern clothing. And I asked the young man, he was very genuine. I said, "When you saw this man, were you afraid?" He said, "Oh no, he waved to me." And I kind of got a chill after that, and I didn't ask him any more questions. We had a private investigation in this house about 2 months ago. It was 5 men from Florida, very serious, a couple scientists. I thought they'd have no problem in this building, but when I came down at midnight to see how they were, I never saw 5 grown men so shook up from all the activity they had. One of the men, who was the father, was wearing a Confederate outfit. He was sitting on one of these benches here, and he got pushed right off the bench. all their equipment, their hard drives fried. They said that never happened. We also have been known to have some type of phantom ghost cat in this building, and all of us guides and even on tours have heard a cat screeching or meowing. We know there are no cats in this building, but there was a group in here not long ago, and two women said, "So you have cats in this building?" I said, "Well, not real cats, but we have heard cats that could be paranormal related." They said, "Oh no, I saw a white cat in this room, and my friend here saw a black cat." There's no cats in this room. But all through the house, most of the experiences people have from getting touched or poked, they'll feel fingers in their hair. People have gotten scratched. People have been pushed from behind. A ball rolled from the entire width of the cellar, landed in the feet of the guests, and the reaction was so genuine, it just had to be something paranormal. And I've seen that happen as well. We even have a spirit in this house named Adam who likes to wish people happy birthday. I'll be watching TV and the stations will change by itself. I have a reading lamp that's remote controlled that I never use, and the spirits do like to get my attention by periodically turning it on. I have had pictures fly off my dresser. Windows have slammed shut. I have been startled many times, but I have never been physically harmed. And I always say that the day comes when I get physically harmed, that's when there'll be a for rent sign on my apartment window. So we also believe there is something even darker than who might be the evil Miss Rosa. And several people, mediums that I considered respectable, that didn't know each other over a 3 or 4 month period, described something in the cellar that had hooves, claws, and a tail. And it was described that way by 3 different people that didn't know each other. So when you hear multiple accounts of something, you got to start wondering. And as a person who lives here, some nights I don't sleep so well, but I do. I mean, this building, even though I've lived here and I give tours, I feel a dark vibe on just about every tour that I give. The experiences that the people have, people go into the cellar especially, they're overcome by a feeling of sadness, and people have been pushed pretty hard in that cellar. And I do think there is a dark entity. I respect this building and what happened here, and I take a lot of pride in what we do. But yes, there is a dark energy, especially in that cellar. All right, so we are in the cellar of the orphanage, and it would be here in the cellar that Rosa Carmichael saved her cruelest punishment of children. And one of those punishments, especially for the older children, she would actually shackle them to the walls of this cellar. And this is the last remaining evidence we have. Just the top part, which is the tie wire, is original. This piece is not. And up until 10 years ago, there was actually tie wire all along these stone walls, which are original, as are the wood beams. Now, Rosa couldn't always shackle some of the younger children because their wrists are too tiny, but she had other means to punish them. And in the corner is a barrel that is a replica, but she would place children as young as 4 or 5 years of age inside of a barrel like that. She would tie their wrists to the side of the barrel. She would fill the barrel with cold water. Poor kids' legs would grow weary. The only thing saving them from drowning is the fact their wrists are tied to the barrel. And her cruelest punishment of all is what she called solitary confinement. And that would be a confined space down a dark passageway that is referred to as the pit. It's about 4 feet by 8 feet. She would place children inside this confined space. She would tie them up or shackle them. And the children could be in there for hours, sometimes for days, sometimes for as long as a week. When the children are down here, they're getting very little food, terrified. These are friends and classmates. They would hear Rosa's footsteps walking above on the wood floor. And when she'd open that creaky cellar door, they didn't know what to expect next. We know there would have been rodents, mice, rats. There's documentation that rats were gnawing at the children's feet. And it just had to be a horrifying experience. And additionally, there are no windows down here, no natural light. The kids would have been in total darkness. People are overcome with emotion. Some people will come down to the cellar and will turn around and say, "I can't stay down here." I have had people start crying. They feel a sadness of what happened here. It's very challenging to give a tour when the person next to you is sobbing uncontrollably. And I have actually seen, now I always say that young people on the tours are generally more open-minded to the spirit world because a lot of adults will try to come up with a logical explanation for something that may happen. I've actually observed children in the cellar actually having a conversation, what they tell me is with an actual spirit. And it is very, very genuine. I retired and said, it's time for me to move to Gettysburg. And the first apartment I see online is the orphanage building. And I said, I have to see this. And I was actually the first person to see the apartment, which my apartment was part. This is a 3-story building. It was all used for the orphanage. And on the level I live was actually the living quarters of the matron, the cruel woman, Rosa J. Carmichael. And I did have a paranormal experience when I moved here 4.5 years ago. In my 24 years of visiting and living here, I've had 2 experiences where I believe I've seen apparitions, and the most recent was 4.5 years ago. I was in my living room taking an afternoon nap on my sofa, and when I woke up at the foot of my couch, I see a woman in a black Victorian dress. Her hair is up in a bun with a little hat, and she is staring at me. I did what any brave person would do. I pulled the blanket over my head, and that's the God's honest truth. And when I peeked out, she was gone. And my living room is the actual living space of Rosa J. Carmichael. So we do not have a photograph to even verify what she looks like. But in my mind, I saw Rosa J. Carmichael. Obviously, we can't predict the paranormal, but common things that people hear. Sometimes guests hear footsteps in this building. Sometimes people hear growling sounds. The one thing I'll say, at the time of this filming, very close to the anniversary of the Battle of Gettysburg, the paranormal activity does seem to ramp up. I listen for voices of children. You might feel sensations of being touched or poked or even gently pushed. People have been scratched. I'm hoping that won't happen tonight. But, and you may get a visit from Rosa or one of the children's spirits. So anything is possible.